General Zarak was feared throughout the galaxy. His name alone sent shivers down the spines of entire civilizations. He had crushed planets, defeated armies, and wiped out entire species without breaking a sweat. His power seemed limitless. For years, Zarak had ruled with an iron fist, and no one had dared challenge him. Everyone who had tried to resist him was crushed without mercy. But there was one thing Zarak feared more than anything else: a human with a plan. He had heard stories of how humans, small and weak compared to the mighty alien races, had turned the tides of wars in the past with nothing but their cleverness and strategy. This idea gnawed at Zarak, always lurking in the back of his mind. He had made sure to eliminate every human that crossed his path, but he knew deep down that there was always the possibility of one human who could be different. It was a quiet evening when Zarak received an encrypted message. The transmission was simple, just a few words on a blank screen. "I have a plan. I will defeat you." Zarak stared at the message, his fists tightening. Who would be bold enough to send such a message to him? He could feel his heart rate increase. His first instinct was to ignore it. After all, humans were no match for him. But something about the message made him pause. His irrational fear, started to creep in. The message came from a human, an insignificant soldier who had been captured during one of Zarak's campaigns. The human's name was Eli Thorne. He had been nothing more than a prisoner, thrown into a dark cell like the countless others Zarak had dealt with. But now, something had changed. Eli Thorne had a plan, and Zarak couldn't shake the feeling that it was not a simple threat. It was real. Zarak immediately ordered his top officers to find out everything they could about Eli. Where had he come from? What was his background? What made him so dangerous? His officers returned with troubling news. Eli had been a military strategist on Earth. He was not just any soldier. He was one of their best, someone trained in tactics that even Zarak's most seasoned generals would struggle to understand. Despite his fear, Zarak dismissed the idea that one human could defeat him. He had destroyed entire fleets, wiped out civilizations with ease. No human, no matter how smart, could possibly defeat him. But still, the nagging feeling lingered. The plan wasn't just about weapons or armies. It was something deeper, something more clever. Zarak couldn't put his finger on it, but he had to stop it before it was too late. Days passed, and strange things began to happen. Zarak's warships, the ones he trusted the most, started malfunctioning. Simple communications were being intercepted, important data was stolen, and crucial supplies were mysteriously disappearing. His trusted officers were being replaced by unknown figures, and his best soldiers were acting out of character. Zarak grew paranoid. Every time he tried to investigate, he found nothing, but the damage continued. He couldn't understand what was happening. And then, one by one, his top commanders began disappearing. First, it was General Vorn, one of Zarak's most loyal leaders. He had led successful campaigns for years, but one day, he was simply gone. There were no signs of a struggle, no messages, nothing. Zarak's next best general, Kor, was found dead in his quarters, with a strange symbol carved into the floor. Zarak's suspicions grew. Could this be the work of Eli Thorne? Was this the human's plan in motion? Zarak's desperation reached new heights. He ordered his fleet to search the entire galaxy for Eli, but the more he searched, the more frustrated he became. He felt like he was walking in the dark, unable to find the source of the threat. It was as if the human was always one step ahead, out of reach, just beyond Zarak's grasp. The suspense continued to build, and every time Zarak thought he had caught onto the human's plan, it slipped away, leaving him frustrated and anxious. The fear that had always been buried deep inside him began to take over. How could one human, locked away in a cell, be causing so much chaos? Zarak was used to being in control, but now he felt helpless. He was the one being hunted, not the other way around. One night, Zarak received another message. This time, it was more detailed, more specific. Eli Thorne explained his plan in simple terms. You think you are invincible. You think you know everything. But you don't know your own weaknesses. I will show you. Zarak's heart raced as he read the message. He immediately ordered his officers to track down Eli, But it was too late. The plan had already begun. His empire was crumbling from within, and he could do nothing to stop it. Every move he made seemed to lead him into deeper trouble. The human had outsmarted him. The general's worst fear had come true. It wasn't just that a human had challenged him, it was that a human had won, and he hadn't even seen it coming. As Zarok stood in his command center, staring at the endless stars outside, he realized something terrifying. The galaxy's greatest general, the one who had conquered everything, had been defeated by the simplest weapon of all, a human with a plan. Zarok had never felt more vulnerable. The fear he had tried to ignore had consumed him, and now it was too late. General Zarok's empire had never been challenged. He ruled with an iron fist, and no one dared defy him. His army was vast, his weapons powerful, and his enemies had learned long ago that resisting him meant certain death. Zarok was feared across the galaxy, and that fear was his weapon. But there was one thing he didn't expect: a human, small and seemingly insignificant, who would rise up against him, not with force, but with something far more dangerous: quiet precision. It all began when a human named Eli Thorne was captured. He was just another soldier from a small human colony, caught during one of Zarok's raids. At first, Eli seemed no different from the countless others who had been captured. He was weak, injured, and silent. Zarok didn't even bother to interrogate him at first. He was nothing more than a prisoner to be forgotten. But something in the back of Zarok's mind told him to keep an eye on Eli. There was something different about him, something Zarok couldn't put his finger on. For weeks, Eli remained quiet. He never spoke, never protested his fate. Zarok's officers began to think he was just another broken prisoner, but Zarok didn't share their certainty. He had seen enough of human resilience to know that appearances could be deceiving. He ordered his men to watch Eli closely, but they reported nothing unusual. The human simply sat in his cell, quiet and still. One day, however, everything changed. Zarok was in his command center when an urgent message came through. "General, there's been an incident. Several of your top officers have gone missing." Zarok's face hardened. His officers were some of the best in the galaxy. For them to disappear without a trace was unthinkable. He immediately ordered an investigation. But the search for the missing commanders led nowhere. No signs of struggle, no clues, nothing. It was as if they had vanished into thin air. As the days went on, more strange things began to happen. Zarok's warships, the pride of his empire, began to malfunction. Communications went down, systems were sabotaged, and crucial resources were stolen. At first, Zarok dismissed it as bad luck. But as the incidents grew more frequent, he started to feel the first stirrings of fear. Who could be behind this? Who could infiltrate his empire with such ease? Then, his worst fears were confirmed. One of his top generals, Kor. There were no signs of a struggle, no blood, nothing, just the body, lying still as if he had died in his sleep. The strangest thing, however, was the message left on the wall next to him: "It's too late. The plan is already in motion." Zarok's heart raced. He knew that message wasn't meant for his men. It was meant for him. Someone was playing him, and that someone was human. The realization struck Zarok with full force. Eli Thorne wasn't just a prisoner. He was behind the entire plot. Zarok immediately ordered a lockdown of the entire fortress. No one could leave, no one could enter. But it was already too late. Eli's plan had already spread like a disease, infiltrating every corner of Zarok's empire. Zarok felt the walls closing in on him. The general called his most trusted officers to a meeting, hoping to rally his forces and stop the sabotage before it destroyed everything. But when they arrived, they found a chilling scene. One by one, his officers dropped dead, poisoned without even knowing what hit them. The room was filled with the scent of a strange gas, one Zarok recognized from his past, something only a few in the galaxy had access to. As the poison spread, Zarok's mind raced. Who had done this? Who had known enough to access the most secure parts of his base? The answer was clear: Eli Thorne. The quiet human had outsmarted him, and now Zarok was running out of time. With his officers dead and his control slipping away, Zarok's paranoia grew. He began to question everyone around him. Could one of his own men be working with Eli? Could someone on the inside be betraying him? His empire, once a symbol of power, was now falling apart. And the quiet assassin Eli Thorne was the only one who knew how to bring it all down. The suspense mounted as Zarok's every move seemed to play into Eli's hands. Every attempt to regain control only led to more chaos. Systems failed, weapons malfunctioned, and his most trusted generals were being picked off one by one. Zarok's confidence had shattered, and he realized too late that Eli's plan wasn't about force. It was about outthinking him, making him paranoid, and leaving him helpless. Eli's plan was simple but brilliant. He knew Zarok's greatest weakness, his overconfidence. He knew that Zarok would never suspect a quiet, unassuming human to be capable of such intricate sabotage. The longer Zarok searched for a physical threat, the more the human worked from the shadows, dismantling everything Zarok had built. The final blow came when Zarok tried to confront Eli directly. He ordered a full assault on the prison where Eli was held, expecting a simple capture. But when he arrived, the human was gone, vanished, without a trace. The prison, once secure, was now empty, and Zarok knew with chilling certainty that he had been outwitted. Eli had escaped, leaving Zarok alone in his crumbling empire, a shadow of the fearsome general he had once been. Zarok had been defeated, not by force, but by the quiet assassin who had taken everything from him with nothing more than a plan. General Zarok's reign stretched across the galaxy. His name was whispered in fear, his power unmatched by any force in the universe. He had crushed whole civilizations and left only devastation in his wake. No one dared to defy him. No one challenged his rule. His army was loyal. His forces were unstoppable, and his enemies were always crushed before they even had a chance. But there was one secret Zarok didn't know, one truth buried deep beneath his empire. A human, once captured, had discovered something that could destroy everything Zarok had worked for. It began when a rebel soldier, Eli Thorne, was caught during an attack on one of Zarok's supply stations. The attack had been swift, sudden, and seemingly planned with precision. Zarok's forces had easily defeated the rebel forces, and Eli had been taken prisoner without much struggle. To Zarok, he was just another soldier, insignificant, weak, and a part of the endless supply of humans who opposed him. At first, Eli seemed just like the others. He was silent, broken, and didn't resist when they locked him in a cell. Zarok paid him little attention. His usual routine involved interrogating prisoners, extracting any useful information, and then discarding them. But Eli didn't speak. He didn't beg for mercy or try to make deals. He simply sat there, watching, waiting. Something in Zarok's mind nagged at him. Why was Eli so calm? Why didn't he fear the general's reputation? It wasn't normal. Zarok dismissed the thought, but it lingered. He ordered his officers to keep an eye on Eli, just in case. Weeks went by, and still, the human said nothing. Then, one day, without warning, things began to change. Zarok's best commanders started to disappear. One by one, key figures in his empire went missing. First, it was General Kor, one of his most trusted leaders. He'd been working on a classified mission, and then nothing. No message, no signs of struggle. He was gone. Then came the disappearance of Commander Vorn, a veteran warrior who had served by Zarok's side for years. His disappearance was followed by several other officers. It was as if they vanished into thin air. Zarok could feel his grip on the empire beginning to slip. These were not ordinary disappearances. There were no traces, no clues left behind. No sign of an attack or struggle. Whoever was behind this had been careful, precise, and hidden in the shadows. He immediately suspected sabotage. Someone within his ranks had to be orchestrating this, an insider who had knowledge of his empire's most secure operations. But who? And why? His officers were the best. How could anyone get past them without being noticed? Then, the real shock came. Zarok was sitting in his command center when an encrypted message appeared on his screen. It was a single sentence, chilling in its simplicity. You've lost control. The plan has begun. His blood ran cold. The message was a warning. a taunt. Zarek's empire, built on the fear and loyalty of millions, was now unraveling. Who was behind it? Who could possibly be pulling the strings? The suspicion in his heart led him straight to Eli. Zarek realized, with a sickening feeling, that Eli wasn't just another rebel soldier. He was part of something much bigger, something far more dangerous. Eli had known something that Zarek hadn't. He had a secret, a plan that could destroy Zarek's entire empire. Zarek ordered his men to bring Eli in for interrogation. But when they arrived at the prison cell, they found it empty. Eli had vanished, just like the others. Panic set in. Zarek had always prided himself on controlling everything. His empire was secure, his army loyal. But now, with Eli gone and his top officers disappearing, Zarek realized he had been blind to a much deeper conspiracy. The rebel had known exactly how to strike, and Zarek had been too arrogant to notice. Desperation grew within the general as he searched for answers. He interrogated every officer, every soldier, every rebel prisoner. But no one knew anything. It was as if Eli had never existed. Zarek began to understand the true scale of the threat. Eli wasn't just a soldier. He was a symbol of everything Zarek had overlooked. The rebellion had never been about weapons or armies. It had been about knowledge of Zarek's weaknesses, knowledge of his empire's cracks. The rebels, led by Eli, had spent years quietly studying Zarek's weaknesses, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And now, that moment had arrived. Zarek's empire, once invincible, was falling apart. Systems were failing, communications were cut off, and crucial resources were being siphoned away. His once loyal soldiers were now questioning their allegiance, and rumors of a human rebellion spread like wildfire. Zarek realized, too late, that the human rebellion was not just a group of soldiers, it was a well-organized, well-planned resistance that had been brewing for years. And Eli Thorne had been at the heart of it all. The general had underestimated his enemies, and now he was paying the price. As the galaxy's greatest general, Zarek had always believed that power came from fear. But he had forgotten one thing: fear alone could not hold an empire together. The secret that Eli had uncovered was not a weapon, but something far more dangerous: the human ability to outthink, outmaneuver, and outlast their enemies. Zarek learned that the true enemy was not the human soldiers he had crushed, but the human mind itself, a force far more powerful than any weapon he could wield. General Zarek's empire was a machine, unstoppable, efficient, and relentless. For years, he had conquered and destroyed with no opposition strong enough to challenge him. No rebellion had ever lasted long enough to make a dent in his power. Zarek believed that no one, especially not a human, could ever outsmart him. His dominance was absolute, his strength unmatched. But the thing Zarek never considered was that power could be undone, not by force, but by a plan, a human plan. It began with the capture of Eli Thorne, a seemingly average human soldier. Eli's group had attacked a critical supply station, but the assault failed. Zarek's forces swept through, capturing the survivors. Eli had been the last one to surrender, covered in dust and blood, his face expressionless. At first, Zarek didn't think much of him. Eli was just another human, another soldier to be disposed of. He was locked away in the deepest prison, and Zarek's officers expected him to break under interrogation. But the human stayed silent. He gave no information, no threats, just silence. Zarek found this curious, but he was too busy with his plans to care about one lone prisoner. What Zarek didn't know was that Eli wasn't just a soldier, he was something far more dangerous. Eli was a strategist, a mind trained in tactics that even Zarek's best officers would struggle to understand. He wasn't just going to fight Zarek, he was going to outthink him. As the days passed, Zarek went about his usual business, unaware that Eli had been quietly observing everything. The layout of the fortress, the routines of the guards, the weaknesses in the security systems. Eli had been planning. And Zarek was unaware that every passing day brought the human one step closer to bringing the empire to its knees. The first sign of trouble came when the command center's communication system went down. At first, Zarek assumed it was just a malfunction. But then came more disruptions. Entire communication channels went dark, and reports began to come in about supplies being stolen or misdirected. Zarak tried to reassure himself that this was just a series of unfortunate events, but deep inside, something told him this wasn't random. The more he investigated, the more things didn't add up. He decided to personally investigate the fortress, walking through the corridors that once felt so secure. His officers followed him, their eyes sharp, but Zarak's nerves began to fray. It was as if the walls themselves were closing in on him. The once mighty general began to feel vulnerable. Then, without warning, his worst fears came true. His most trusted officer, General Kor, was found dead in his quarters. There were no signs of struggle, no blood, no evidence of anything other than a perfectly calm death. But there was a message carved into the floor: the plan has already begun. Zarak's heart skipped a beat. The message was clear. It wasn't just a random attack. Someone had been working inside his empire, and they had started something bigger than he could imagine. He immediately thought of Eli Thorne, the prisoner who had given him nothing but silence. But now, Zarak was beginning to understand that the silence had been a trick, a game, and he had been the fool who played along. The general ordered an immediate lockdown of the entire fortress. No one could leave or enter, and everyone was to be searched. Yet, despite his best efforts, Zarak couldn't stop the attacks from happening. Every time he thought he had closed a gap, another part of his empire fell apart. Critical data was deleted. Strategic resources vanished. Weapon systems went down. There was no way to stop it. Zarak was losing control. The empire he had built with such strength was crumbling from within. His officers began to whisper of betrayal. Fear spread among his ranks. Zarak realized that the attacks weren't random. They were part of something much bigger, a plan that had been carefully crafted, executed with precision. And it was all the work of Eli Thorne. Desperation fueled Zarak's every move. He ordered a full-scale search for Eli, but it was already too late. The damage had been done. Eli had been more than just a soldier. He was the architect of a rebellion that had been building for years, hidden beneath Zarak's nose. The human had known that brute force alone wouldn't bring down the empire. It would take time, patience, and a plan that would slowly unravel everything Zarak held dear. The general's mind raced as he realized the full scope of Eli's plan. Eli hadn't just attacked the fortress, he had attacked Zarak's entire system. The rebellion had been inside Zarak's empire for years, studying every weakness, every flaw, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Eli had planned everything: the sabotage, the attacks, the careful manipulation of Zarak's own officers. It was brilliant. Too brilliant for Zarak to have seen. The human had exploited Zarak's greatest weakness, his arrogance. He had assumed that his power was untouchable. But Eli's plan had turned that assumption on its head. Zarak finally understood. It wasn't about defeating him in battle. It was about breaking him from the inside. And now, Eli had succeeded. Zarak, once the greatest general in the galaxy, found himself staring at the ruins of his empire. His soldiers were retreating, his commanders questioning his leadership, and his once mighty forces had been scattered by a human with a plan. As the galaxy's most feared general, Zarak had built his empire on strength, on power, on fear. But Eli Thorne had shown him that even the mightiest empire could be toppled with one simple thing, a plan that changed everything. General Zarak had always been the predator. Across the galaxy, his name was spoken in fear and reverence. His enemies had learned not to fight him directly, for every battle they lost was a step toward their extinction. Zarak's empire was vast, his military superiority unquestionable. No one had ever managed to trap him. He had outsmarted, overpowered, and defeated all who stood against him. But Zarak was not prepared for the one thing he could never have anticipated: the final trap set by a single human. It began when Eli Thorne, a rebel soldier captured in one of Zarak's raids, was thrown into the deepest cells of the fortress. Eli had been one of the few humans to challenge Zarak's forces and live. His group had attacked one of Zarak's key supply stations, and though the rebellion had failed, Eli was captured and taken prisoner. Zarek expected him to be another easy case, an insignificant soldier who could be broken through traditional methods. But something about Eli felt different. For weeks, Zarek paid little attention to the prisoner. Eli sat silently in his cell, showing no fear, no anger, just a quiet, calculating demeanor. Most of Zarek's officers thought he was broken, too weak to fight. But Zarek, with his sharp mind, sensed something more. It was almost as if Eli were waiting for something, or perhaps someone. Zarek's suspicions grew, but he dismissed them, focusing on other matters. He had bigger plans to worry about: his empire's continued expansion, the destruction of a rebel stronghold, and the elimination of anyone who dared question his rule. But Eli's silence gnawed at him, and over time, Zarek began to question his own empire. Then it happened. Zarek's closest allies, his most trusted officers, began to fall. At first, it was just a few minor incidents. A commander who was ambushed on a routine mission. A warship that mysteriously malfunctioned. But soon, the attacks became more coordinated. Weapon systems failed. Communication lines were cut. Key soldiers and generals disappeared without a trace. Zarek began to feel an unsettling sense of paranoia. His fortress, once impregnable, seemed to be slipping through his fingers. The general immediately ordered a lockdown. No one was allowed to leave or enter the fortress. His own men were questioned, but no one had answers. There were no clues, no leads. Everything seemed to have been planned with perfect precision. And that's when it hit him. This wasn't random chaos. It was a plan. And the source of that plan was Eli Thorne. Zarek's fear turned into fury. He ordered his best officers to launch a full-scale search for Eli, but the rebel had vanished. The prison that had once held him was empty. Zarek's mind raced. How had Eli escaped? No one could have penetrated the fortress's deepest chambers. He was certain of it. Yet, the evidence was clear. The human was behind it all. Zarek's frustration reached its peak. He had been outwitted, outsmarted by one human. But Zarek was not a fool. He would not allow his empire to crumble because of a single, crafty prisoner. He quickly set a plan in motion. If Eli wanted to play games, then Zarek would play right along. But this time, Zarek would control the board. He ordered his forces to spread across the galaxy, launching a full offensive against any remaining rebel strongholds. Zarek knew that Eli's rebellion would try to regroup, and if they did, he would find them. He had the resources, the technology, and the manpower. There was no place Eli could hide. Days passed, and the search for Eli intensified. Zarek's forces scoured every corner of his empire, but they found nothing. Just as he thought the human was gone, something unexpected happened. Eli sent a message, a simple encryption code that no one in Zarek's empire had seen before. The message contained only one line: "The final trap is set. Welcome to the game." Zarek's blood ran cold. He understood now. Eli had never escaped the fortress. The human had never truly left. He'd been there all along, hidden in plain sight, working behind the scenes, waiting for Zarek to make his next move. The general's heart pounded. This wasn't just a rebellion anymore. It was a game of cat and mouse, where every move Zarek made only pushed him closer into Eli's trap. Zarek's empire, his power, his reputation, it was all at risk. But the worst part? Zarek realized he had already lost. The plan that had been set in motion weeks ago had now reached its final phase. Eli had played him perfectly, leading him down a path of destruction that Zarek could no longer reverse. The final trap was a masterstroke. Eli had quietly infiltrated Zarek's top officers, using his human ingenuity to turn them against each other. Once the officers were divided and weakened, the rebellion moved in. Systems were sabotaged from within. Soldiers who had once been loyal to Zarek now fought against him, not for money or power, but because they had been convinced by Eli that their true loyalty was to the galaxy, not to Zarek's empire. And now, Zarek stood at the edge of a precipice, his once mighty forces reduced to chaos. The empire he had built with blood and iron was crumbling, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. He had been caught in the final trap, and there was no way out. Eli had won.